Hi, and welcome to the Aspire Europe Limited Competent Program Controls course. In this module, we're going to look at information design. My name's Rod Sowden. I'm the lead author for Managing Successful Programs and P3M3, and I'm also the Managing Director of Aspire Europe. I'll be talking you through all these videos and hopefully sharing some experiences with you. When we talk about information, it's really important to remember why we do this and to start with the end in mind, because information is the one thing that's going to give us performance. Good quality information, the utilization of that information is the difference between high performers in the program management world and the weak ones. And if we move up the P3M3 maturity layers, it's all about having information to improve performance, which means being able to analyze, compare trends and projections. So that's where we're going, but there's a tendency for us to leap in the early days and think about the data we need to gather. So let's think the evolution of information. And you'll need to consider when we're doing this, which of these reflects you the most. So we started with emails and memos before that. So the starting point of the gathering of project information is when we start writing it down and sending information to each other. This is what we plan to do. Okay, so that's what you tend to find in kind of zero level P3M3 organizations because they don't know any better. But that's the starting point. And actually, even as they move up through the layers, that starting point can remain to some extent, because we found there's a lot of off-system communication going on where decisions are made and not auditable. So I wouldn't say that that's gone, but it's certainly the first stage of evolution. And once then we move to template world, and you all love your templates, don't we? Yeah, and one of the things that came out of clearly out of Prince 2 world, not so much out of MSP, I'm glad to say, because we didn't ever say they were templates, just said they were information. But the gathering of information in templates, and there's a never-ending list of questions you can ask people. But what people weren't thinking of, and I'll say even the people that put the stuff in the Prince 2 weren't thinking of, was not, was it useful information? What was going to happen to that information? So I'm sure all of you at some stage have filled in PIDs and business cases where you're writing loads of stuff that never ever got used, reviewed, or transitioned into something else. And even worse, we had templates with duplicate information, so that if one bit was changed, it wasn't being changed somewhere else. And when we did some analysis of this at one point, there's basically two threads of information that we need. We need to capture why we need the project, so like the business justification, and then we need to capture the status of the project. And if you think about all the fields that you ever fill in, success criteria, who's doing what, and all that sort of stuff, you can actually split them into those two threads of information. So you may wish to go back and consider what you've actually got and whether it's most important. And if people are feeding information into a template that's never used, then you should be asking why the information is being requested. So then we move forward. We started to take some of the data out, started to put it into some spreadsheets, and we started to see Excel appearing and maybe some access databases so that we could actually report on the data. You may have gone out and put in Project Online or a similar type of product. We're starting to actually mature into this next level of system. And before we knew it, we were able to produce a dashboard. Yeah, and so from a program point of view, we are now gathering data across the projects, aggregating it up, coming up through program offices into the portfolio world. Once we start to get that dashboard, then we can start to do analysis and we can start to do a trend. However, that doesn't mean we do. And we were working with one particularly large client who spat 6 people checking that the templates have been completed, and only one person looking to the future and thinking about what the implications of the data coming in. Yeah, so go back to something I've said in a number of these videos. As soon as you miss one milestone, you are going to be late. So that's how the data has progressed. And then we start to see the more advanced organizations, and quite honestly, we haven't come across that many of them, but I'm very pleased that we've come across some where they're starting to do trend analysis. This is where you're starting to get to level 4 in P3M3 to actually look back and go, well, if we did this, we can do some scenarios. If we don't do that, if we do this, we can speed up in reliability. First place to look is estimates. All right, trend analysis. Nearly all the late reasons is because we had poor estimates. So there's a bit of a shortcut, but there we go. I shouldn't be passing judgment. So, and then ultimately, we're using the data to project where we're going into the future. Yeah, we've got the power. We're comfortable. We're in where we want to be, but where are we going in the future? And that's your evolution of information. So before you start improvement planning, you need to decide which of these areas is your as is state or where you are now. Now, important state of evolution is moving from data to knowledge. Now, we were looking at templates, that's gathering of data. We started to then do some analysis. We started to pull it into systems. We're starting to have information. Whether they're smart enough to use that information is something else. The other thing is whether we trust that information. We've certainly got a case study where we knew of an organization who started to use earned value. They started to see evidence that this project was running late, but they didn't trust the data. And then boom, the project went late. But unfortunately, so the data was correct. And there was a big lesson, and they actually then realized that they had knowledge. So you can see going up the axis that data, we're basically collecting it, organizing it, that's template world, summarizing analysis, that's where we start to put some sort of system in place. Knowledge is where we start to exploit it. So what sort of data do we need to gather when we're thinking about designing a system or a control? Well, we need to have standards, we need to have responsibilities defined, we need to understand the processes, and we're going to need to understand the techniques we're going to use. Are we milestone tracking, earned value? Are we tracking against outcomes? Are we tracking against business change? We need to think about the storage and the systems and the guidance that we're going to use. Now, all those elements feed across, right? So you don't need them when you first start gathering data, but as you move up the hierarchy, these things need to come in place, because data that is gathered not part of a process will not produce useful information, because it needs to come in through a consistent format. So what do we need to know? Well, we all know, don't we, need to think about time, cost, quality, but there's other angles. Yeah, we need to think about stakeholder. Some research by the National Audit Office in the UK reckons stakeholder perception or stakeholder value was more important than time, cost, and quality, because once it goes live, people forget the delays. We've got examples in the UK like Wembley Stadium. Nobody talks about the fact it came in a year late and missed an FA Cup final anymore. I'm sure we'll be the same with Crossrail. Once it's in, it'll be fantastic. So it's really about stakeholder and operational value. Now, against all these, you can do amber, red, and green. Very important on information that you actually are very specific about what you mean when you talk about amber, red, and green. So some indicators you might want to use there on something to consider: workload status, resource, all those kind of things that are going on in a project, so you can aggregate them up to the program level. One of the things we've got there is beware pride and prejudice. All right, so one of the big challenges you'll have with your reporting is honesty. Okay, no program manager wants to put in a red program report. No project manager wants to do it, and least of all, a project sponsor wants to do it. And that's where pride and prejudice comes in. So with that perspective, we need to really have independent challenge and verification. It's very easy to wind a red status down to an amber. Nobody tends to worry about ambers that much, right? So the amount of times we do P3M3 assessments and we see an amber or a green project, and as soon as we open it up, it's got a red risk. How can a project be amber or green if it's got a red risk? Because a red risk means it's going to kill it. Now, part of the problem there is that they haven't really defined what red, amber, and green means. And that's just a personal view, is that actually you should have 4 criteria: red, blue, amber, green, whichever order you want them to go in, or maybe a black in there, because if amber is kind of middle, it's vaguely okay, everybody's going to pick amber, because nobody's going to want to say we're perfect, which is green. Nobody's going to want to say we're dead in the water, which is red. So there's pride and prejudice in every role, which is why the portfolio office needs to challenge and challenge and challenge to get this right. An important aspect of this is lead and lag indicators, which we've covered in the course, which people don't always think about. So what are those early indicators that suggest things could be going wrong? And what are those early indicators that things are going to turn around? So we've just put a few lead indicators there. Training of staff's usually an early indicator of better performance, but you could be a year or two away. A missed milestone will mean late delivery. So you're coming up, somebody starts reporting they've missed a milestone. There's a lead indicator that you're going to have problems with that project. It may not be on the critical path, so it's not the end of the world, but there's something wrong. It could just be estimation, but that could be endemic across other things. So it's quite a big lead indicator. We've got slow recruitment, means you're going to have a resource shortage later. So you're going to have, it may not be a problem today, but it will be in the future. A massive problem is late sign-offs, right? This is the business case process is controlled by finance, and nobody's really considering the implications of a late approval of a business case. And it gets approved 6 months late, but nobody ever changes the milestones and stage gates to put them back 6 months, because apparently a miracle will happen. And that's all down to you, program managers. You're going to do that miracle. Poor board and steering group attendance is another one, quite often underestimated. And some time ago, we came across a customer that actually, if the sponsor or the program SRO didn't turn up for the program board, it automatically went red as a report. Now, I thought that was fantastic, because that's definitely going to keep the attention of your SRO. But if they're not committed to turning up and making you their top priority, are they the right SRO? And then we've got lag indicators, and these are things that we see that can tell us there's a problem earlier on. So high levels of change requests will tell us that we've got poor definition processes. Maybe it's around requirements, which is a popular one. High volumes of issues can indicate poor risk management. May not be poor requirements, it may just be poor risk. So you haven't managed the risk and now it's live. All right, late delivery, telling you about poor estimation. Budget overruns are an interesting one. That could indicate a lack of competence when assessing costs. Could be endemic across the organisation, or we just got our estimations wrong. Okay, and supply chain and contract disputes are always going to be a problem because you may be losing the support and commitment of your supply chain, which could be poor procurement, poor negotiation on their side or yours. Okay, and just linking it back to maturity. So I've mentioned a couple of times during the video that it's linked to performance and P3M3. So levels 1, which is awareness, 2 is a defined process that some people follow. Level 3 is consistent process, then we're managing it, which is trend analysis. And level 5 is predictive analysis. All these are basically driven by data. Okay, so you can get to level 1 and 2 using templates. You might even be able to get into level 3, but templates and spreadsheets, although you can use business objects and reporting tools, there are some fundamental challenges around data aggregation and consolidated reports. And one of the problems with level 3s sometimes is they get completely absorbed into delivering the reports. So they get the ticks in the boxes, but is the effort repaying itself? It will only repay itself if they move to level 4 and do the trend analysis, scorecards, and look for those improvements. And actually getting up to level 5 is a natural progression. Okay, well, there you go. Hopefully that was useful. Finally, I'd just like to say thanks for your time. I hope you found that presentation interesting, and I hope you enjoy this module in the course. Thank you. Time for you to go and enjoy a cup of coffee.